Okay. Lights low, shoulders loose. Breathe in for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And out for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. SFX, winter wind, fair off church bell. A quiet crowd, murmur Paris. Late December, 1386. Frost on every sill. A pale sky like scraped pewter. The city is awake early because today the law will speak in iron. The place is a field prepared beside the abbey walls, wooden galleries hammered together for nobles. A wide strip of churned earth for horses, and a high scaffold with a single chair tied down for one woman who has already paid too much for the truth. Her name is Marguerite de Carouge. She has said in public what most would never dare whisper. The Jacques Legris forced his way into her home while her husband, Jean de Carouge, was away. She swore it before magistrates. She repeated it through cold rooms and colder looks. She kept saying it when it became clear that every step toward justice meant stepping into danger herself. Medieval courts ran out of answers. When witnesses contradicted and reputations wrestled, the judges chose a very old path. Trial by combat. Let God decide, they said, and they meant it. That's why Marguerite sits on that scaffold, hands bound to the arms, a rope ready to tighten if her husband loses. If Jean is defeated, the verdict will fall back on her false accusation, and the sentence will be death by fire. This is not theatre for her. There is no safe seat. SFX, trumpet flourish. Horse-tack jingles to men ride into the cold. Light like arguments made of steel. Jean de Carouge, compact, broad, jaw locked so hard it looks like prayer. Jacques Legris, taller, polished, the easy poise of a man who has won rooms before he speaks. Squires settle their caparisons, check girths, steady the long ash lances. A royal herald lifts his voice. Up in the gallery sits King Charles VI and Queen Isabeau, faces careful, eyes fixed. Thousands watch, holding the kind of silence that aches. The marshal drops his hand, hooves hit hard ground. The first impact sounds like a tree splitting under snow. Both lances shatter, white splinters flare against grey air. Neither rider falls. The crowd exhales in one long ribbon of breath. Swords leap out, shields lift. The two men meet and break, blades clanging in quick, bright notes. You can tell a lot from a minute of sword work. Legris is longer in reach, tidy with his feet, good at not giving the same opening twice. Carouge is pressure itself, stepping through glancing hits, trying to make the fight smaller, closer, more honest. They circle into mud and out again, both panting, both wearing the fight across their breastplates in scratches like chalk. SFX, steel on steel. A short grunt, boots scraping frozen soil. Axes replace swords not for style, but because weight answers questions edges cannot. A mist swing bites earth so deep it steals a heartbeat to yank free. A glancing hit rattles bones. Carouge takes a blow up high. The crowd flinches with the kind of flinch that ripples 1,000 shoulders. At once, he drops to a knee, and for one terrible instant everything points toward the scaffold. Soft cue, breathe in for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And out for 6. He rises, it isn't pretty. He shoves forward with shield and shoulder the way a door forces. Open in a storm. They crash together, no space for long swings now. Only elbows, hips, instinct. The axes are too long for this range, so hands go hunting for the shorter answer that everyone prays they'll never need. A dagger appears, Ms. Ericord, The mercy giver, a thin spike meant to find the places armor can't hide. Claws at Legrice's visor. Metal squeals. Confess, he rasps, voice frayed by cold and effort. Legrice denies, tight, hard, immediate. He twists, tries to roll the weight, tries to pry a fate loose from a grip that will not loosen. The dagger finds daylight. It slips through the visor gap at the cheek. Silence. Not the kind made by quiet, the kind made by stopped. Even the flags forget to move. Then noise returns in sheets first, a single cry far back, then the clatter of a dropped gauntlet, then the big, wet sound of winter breath as a city remembers how to breathe together. The marshal lifts his staff. The king inclines his head. The verdict is sealed. On the scaffold. Knots come free fast. Hands lift Marguerite up. Her relief is not a cheer. It's a long, shaking exhale that leaves her lighter by a stone and heavier. By a lifetime, she is spared. Not by a story told behind closed doors, not by a letter, but by a fight carried out on frost and clay where everyone could watch the decision happen. SFX, crowd slowly thinning, hoofbeats retreating. What did Paris witness? Some say justice made visible. Others will argue for centuries after that a fight doesn't prove truth, only strength, nerve, and the angled destiny chose that afternoon. But in a time when courts believed heaven weighed in on earthly steel, this was as certain as the age could make it. Jean de Carouge walks away, bloody and famous. Jacques Legrice lies still, a reputation ended at the exact speed of a heartbeat. Marguerite leaves the scaffold alive, which in this story is the only sentence that matters. Let's place it honestly. This was not just a duel. It was a public referendum on a woman's word in a world built to ignore it. She spoke. She refused to be pressed back into private silence. She risked the worst kind of ending to force the city to look. Whether you think God bent the outcome, or human skill did, or both, the fact remains. She walked away. In a century that rarely loved women. Who stood up, that is a quiet miracle. History books will call this often the last sanctioned judicial duel in France. After this winter, judges lean harder toward parchment than lances. The law begins to prefer documents to oaths on horseback. But that shift happens one cold morning at a time. Today, the crowd files out, pleased to have seen a clean finish. People love a clean finish. Truth, meanwhile, is not always so tidy. And that is the part most stories leave out. Soft beat, picture the edges of the field as they empty. A boy pries a lance splinter from the mud like a souvenir. A baker tightens her cloak and thinks about tomorrow's loaves. A squire, suddenly older than he was at dawn, carries a dented helmet and does the math on what dents cost. A carpenter looks up at the scaffold he built, pockets the last nail, and tells himself he'll be home before dark. Somewhere in a narrow lane, Marguerite chooses a longer path, because relief travels at walking speed and needs space. SFX, flag ropes, tapping wood, distant bell again. There's an easy way to end this tale. One man stood, one man fell, justice served. But bedtime is a good hour for the harder truth. Trial by combat satisfied crowds because it turned doubt into a picture. The picture felt like certainty. People could sleep after a picture, but certainty isn't always faithful. Sometimes it is only finished. That's why this duel stays famous, did what the age demanded in the exact way people craved to see. And it put a real woman's life on the line to pay for that. Clarity. If you've ever wanted a problem to resolve itself by A showdown, a final test, a big reveal. You know the feeling of this morning in Paris. It's human, it's comforting, it's also dangerous. The world is full of stories that end before the truth has time to catch up. But give this day its due. Valor was real, danger was real, a promise was kept, and a life was spared. And those are not small things. Very soft, one more breath. In for 4 and out for 6. The frost will melt. The hoofprints will blur. The city will go back to bread and taxes and gossip, the way cities always do. Marguerite will keep living past the scaffold, past the winter, past the crowd that went home sated. Jean will carry honors and scars in equal weight. Clerks will copy the record by candle, and centuries from now, people with warm hands will argue about exactly what this duel proved. For tonight, we can set the armor down. Let the last of the trumpet echo fade into the stone. Let the field empty. Let the cold air grow still. SFX, wind eases. A far, gentle drum once. Fade to quiet, sleep well. When you're ready, we'll drift to the next Talon, other night. Another field, another breath, different air tonight. Pale dust lifts with each step, tasting faintly of old seas and cumin. The road is a long brown ribbon over stony hills, and along it rattles what looks like a travelling ironmonger's shop. Carts, shields, spare spearheads, ropes, barrels with hopeful labels like water. At the slow centre of it all rides Godfrey, of bullion broad in the shoulder, quiet in the face, the kind of man who looks as if he measures his words against the weight of his armor. We're in the years of the First Crusade, when letters from distant priests fell like sparks on very dry straw. Men who had never seen the sea are suddenly walking toward it with crosses stitched to their cloaks. The stories they tell themselves are bright and simple. Hardship now, holiness later. Reality is messier blisters, disputes about rations, and maps that look suspiciously like prayers. Still, they move, because moving forward is easier than explaining why you would stop. Godfrey is no king yet, and never quite will be one in the way you think. Later, in Jerusalem, when victory and scarcity and politics tangle into a crown, he'll refuse the word king, choosing instead a title that fits more like a penitent's cloak, advocate of the holy self. For now, he is a lord with discipline, a commander with good wrists, a weary man trying to keep too many promises at once. SFX camp murmurs, water ladled into cups, a whetstone rasping lightly on steel. At dusk, the column slows into a camp wrapped around a low hill cook fires, petting small pots, tents staked where the wind sulks least. Far off, the last light sits on a distant citadel, like a coin on a table edge. Scouts return with the news every army knows by heart. Supplies trickle, rumors flood, and the enemy is either very near or very clever. Either way, there will be a test. With night comes the small rituals that keep men human. Boots off to shake. Out stones. A strip of linen wound once more around a blister. Bread torn into patient bites. A letter reread by firelight, even though it says the same things it said yesterday. Godfrey eats slowly, the way someone eats who wants his men to see steadiness. When they sleep, he walks the perimeter, pausing where the dark pools deeper. Leadership is partly logistics, partly theater, and partly walking the same ground everyone else walks, but making it look less lonely. Morning breaks, clean the kind of pale, glassy sun that tells you it will be cruel later, before the heat gets. Ideas, A herald rides out from the walls ahead, standard snapping like a sharp opinion. The words he throws across the dust are the oldest in war. Send a champion. Their side has untold as a doorframe, they say. Strong as a gate hinge, armored like a bell. Come meet him, and meet your God with him. This is not a duel to end the siege, no matter who survives. It's theater that both sides understand. A performance review with sharp feedback. A way to feed courage with a story you can retell during the hungry hours after sundown. A ring is marked on the flats, not with ropes, but with the pressed half-circle of soldiers who silently agree to be a fence. The man who steps out to represent the city is indeed large male, draped like a silver curtain, a round shield patterned in colors the dust can't quite dull. Giant is a flexible word in a world where most men are shorter than the statues we make of them, but he is certainly big enough to tilt a rumor into a chronicle. He raises his blade once to catch the light, the way artisans hold up tools. To show their edges, the crowd breathes in. Dust hangs like a held note. Godfrey enters without hurry. His helmet gives him the careful look of a man listening to a complicated confession. His sword looks ordinary in that troubling way expert tools do. The weight is right. The balance is remembered, not guessed. He tests the ground with his heels. He lifts his shield and lowers his center, the tiniest amount small signs that say he's thinking with his knees as much as with his plans. A marshal, no referee, just a witness glances, once toward both camps, as if to check whether the sky is watching. It is. He lowers a staff, SFX, a single drumbeat. Then wind, they close. First contacts in these things are always louder than sense. The giant's strike lands hard on Godfrey's shield and travels down his arm like bad news. You can almost hear the bones take a vote. Godfrey answers not with a flourish, but with a tidy, mean chop at the edge where shield meets strap, turning protection into weight. The ring mutters in approval. It's the sound soldiers make when somebody uses their brain under pressure. The big man presses. He's used to space obeying him. Godfrey gives ground in inches, not yards, and tests shot. Faint hip shift, tap to helm, a little rhythm to see how the other man breathes between strikes. It's never only muscle. It's always lungs, too. In the thin quiet inside the clamor, two people are doing arithmetic on the price of staying upright. They break and circle. You can read a fighter's day in his feet. The champion's steps are a touch long built for spectacle and marches. Godfrey's are tight, short, economical, as if he's counting in the currency of tendons. The shield's kiss, again bang, and everything narrows to sparks and the taste of iron under the tongue. Somewhere a soldier coughs, then pretends he didn't. Soft cue, breathe in for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6. The next exchange is the one storytellers love because it keeps them employed for centuries. The giant lifts to hammer down, posture opening like a door at noon. Godfrey doesn't meet force with force. That's a young man's mistake. He steps inside the arc, lets the blow kiss his shoulder plate instead of his head, and spends all his saved inches at once. His sword travels not in a grand painting stroke, but in a tight, practiced line along the seam where helmet and mail do their quiet argument. Chroniclers, whose ink grows more enthusiastic the farther they are from the event, will write that the cut splits the man from crown to saddle, clean as a fruit on a stall. Physis asks to be consulted. Mail rings and bone and all the resisting miserable details of being alive make such neat geometry unlikely, but decisive. Yes, the body knows when a line has been crossed. The champion goes from fighting to falling in the space between two breaths. Godfrey's follow-through is tidy and preventer like shield up, head down. The way you move when you've learned that people are dangerous even while they are ending. SFX, a single shout, then a rolling murmur that fades. Silence settles, not as a blanket, but as a decision. Men on both sides feel the small earthquake of a story being born. It isn't peace, it isn't victory. It's something armies run on almost as well as grain. The belief that your side can put a clean picture on the day. The ring unsit. Few of Godfrey's men thump his shoulders with gloves. He lifts his visor and takes exactly one breath of the morning, as if to prove the air still belongs to everyone. By evening, the tale edits itself. No one retells the part where Godfrey stepped wrong once, or where his shoulder stung. The blow grows taller, the sword grows brighter, the giant grows more giant. A carpenter who watched from the back will tell it as if he stood up front. A scribe will later suggest the hand of heaven tipped the wrist at the last instant. Another will argue politely, overwhelmed that good training is miracle enough. Godfrey does not correct them. He eats and sleeps and wakes to the same map that waited yesterday. The city still stands. The gates are still shut. Logistics have no respect for legend. But the camp feels different in that invisible way that keeps men moving. The rumor in the blood that says, "We can do this because he did that." You don't put it on a ledger, but it spends. Let's be kind to the other side, too. Somewhere beyond the walls, a boy who believed his champion was invincible is learning the adult lesson that size is not destiny and certainty is fragile. He will carry that knowledge into a quieter life, where it will make him very good at not underestimating shopkeepers. And the truth about swords. They do not slice through iron like cloth. They punish openings. They bully joints. They are tools that ask posture to make mistakes. When chroniclers scribble about impossible cuts, they are trying to put words to something entirely real. The shock of watching a human decision happen at the exact speed of a blink. Legend is just a coat we sew for astonishment so we can wear it longer. Soft cue, nearer to a whisper, breathe in and slowly out. It is tempting to demand that the duel mean more than it means an omen, a hinge of history, a verdict from heaven. But most days in war, even dramatic ones, end in the same chores. Repairing straps, counting arrows, tasting water to see if it has learned any new tricks. The duel changes tone, not the map. Tone matters. It will float men through hard miles tomorrow. Maps matter more. They will argue back at dawn. SFX, fire, crackle, night insects, distant dog bark before sleep. Godfrey walks the perimeter again. He pauses by a cart where someone snores softly under a heap of blankets. He turns and looks toward the walls where a line of lamps pricks the dark. He is not a poet, but he understands that a leader's most important skill is managing fears, without lying to them. He touches his shoulder where the blow landed. He flexes the fingers that held the hilt. Then he does the bravest thing a commander does after a victory. He tells himself it changes less than the camp hopes, and he plans anyway. There's a gentler footnote to add. Later, when fever finds Richard the Lionheart during a different war, Saladin sends snow from the mountains to cool him. That small courtesy doesn't undo anything, but it reminds us that even in burning times, Hands sometimes reach across heat to say, I recognize your humanity. I like to think the men who watched Godfrey fight understood a spark of that. Tooth, strange fellowship of people who do dangerous things carefully. Now, let the ring in your head widen and dissolve. The dust settles. The swords are sleeping. The sky tilts toward its deep blue patience. SFX, wind easing. A last log shifts in the fire, one more breath together. In for 4 and out for 6. Tomorrow's road will be long, as roads so often are when stories travel on foot. For tonight, it is enough that you saw 2 men make a decision at the center of a circle, and that you let the lesson be small and useful. Timing is kinder than force. Breath is smarter than panic. And legends are just true moments wearing their best clothes. Sleep well when you're ready. We'll walk north to a green field where a small horse and a calm king wait with an axe. And a lesson. Different weather tonight, Scotland, in late June, 1314. The sky is a high pewter bowl with blue poured thinly along the rim. On the fields near Stirling, thistles nod and the ground remembers last week's rain. We're a breath before the battle of Bannockburn, and the air has that still, humming quality of a theatre moments before the curtain lifts. On a small, sturdy, palfrey more compact sedan than muscle car rides, Robert the Bruce, King of Scots. He isn't posing. He is thinking the way commanders think when the map already lives in their bones. He knows the new park's woods. He knows where the earth goes from friendly to treacherous, where hooves will bog, where a man on foot will feel taller than a man on a heavy horse. He has spent years learning to turn patience into an edge sharper than steel. Behind him, Scots form up in tight spearman blocks, schiltrons, hedgehogs of pikes meant to say, politely but firmly, no to cavalry. They are farmers, smiths, and men with stubborn faces. The rhythm of their practice taps on the evening. Set pike, brace pike, breathe with your neighbor. A good formation is a choir-edge voice heard because all voices agree. SFX, wood shafts, knocking, muffled orders. Low pipe far off across the open, the English host pools and gleams. It is huge, impressive, and slightly out of breath from the long march north. Standards flap like slow applause. Somewhere in that bright confusion is Sir Henry de Bohun, a knight of pedigree and nerve, mounted on a tall destrier and armored the way wealth imagines safety. He has the keen, warm certainty of a man who has read a lot of ballads about loan charges and happy endings. From his saddle, de Bohun looks across and sees something knights dream about. A king, apparently alone, on a small horse, without a gaggle of banners or a wall of guards. Temptation writes in big letters. He lowers his lance. Friends may shout advice. Who can hear advice when destiny is clearing its throat? Bruce watches that long, glittering line turn into a single bright needle aimed at his ribs. He does not flee. He does not even take his time hating the mathematics of it. He simply turns his palfrey a hair to the side and rests along Danish axe in his hands like a man who knows the weight of the tool as well as his own heartbeat. Soft cue, breathe in for 4, out for 6. Here is where time does the trick it does in all good stories. The horse is charging, the lance is leveling. The crowd of 2 armies is holding one enormous breath that carries the word now in it like a whistle. And Bruce waits. He waits until the last possible half-heartbeat. Then he moves not much, a slide step by the palfrey that would look like a courtesy if it weren't mortal geometry. A rise in the stirrups, a twist from the hip, and the axe comes down in a line that blacksmiths understand and poets pretend they do. The blow meets de Bohan's helmet at its vulnerable seam. The land so confident a second ago stabs where Bruce is no longer. The axe bites, and the haft snaps with a kind of sound carpenters call bad news. The knight slumps, the horse stumbles past, and 1,000 men exhale in an animal chorus that begins in the gut and comes out as a roar. SFX, one great shout, then rippling cheers. A horse skids, wind returns. That's the famous bitter instant the ballads keep in a jar for rainy nights. But let's take a step back and look at the quiet parts that make it possible. First, ground. Bruce chose it. The fields here are cut with soft places and awkward slopes. Heavy cavalry loses its perfect math when the earth says, not today. Second, patience. Medieval war loves spectacle. Bruce loves results. He let de Bohan write his own mistake in long, clean script. Then he underlined it with an axe. Third, the small horse. Egos like giant animals, angles like small ones. That palfrey pivoted like a sentence with the extra word removed. After the Scots' laughter rises into the gloom. There must have been clapping of shields, stomps, the peculiar high cheer that comes from realizing your side has a story now. Stories blow like wind through ranks. They warm feet. They put starch in spines. On the other line, the English feel their stomachs tilt a degree toward doubt. It's not defeat that comes tomorrow with mud and pikes, it's an advance copy of the feeling. Bruce's men crowd him. They praise, they grin, they ask to touch the axe as if the broken haft itself were a blessing. Chroniclers will tell us their king said little, and what he did say was not a sermon about destiny but a carpenter's grumble. I'm sorry I broke my good axe. That's a leader's trick, putting attention back on the small, true thing nobody can argue with. It calms blood. Mid-part breath in 4-4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Night creeps in with midges and the smell of horse. Fires pop along the lines. Scots tighten straps, share bread, repeat the moment to one another in versions that grow a little more polished with each telling. He waited. I swear he waited so long, someone says. You could see the thought move from his shoulder to his hands, says another. That is how morale is built. Repetition wrapped around a single clean picture. Across the field, English tents glow like lanterns in fog. Their commanders argue softly about fords and prayer, and whether God appreciates big armies or well-placed feet. In some pavilion, a knight unlatches his helm and stares at his hands, thinking about the feel of a lance when certainty turns to splinters. He will ride tomorrow because that is the job. Tonight he learns respect for angles, and in between those two worlds, somewhere near the trampled grass, lies a broken haft and a dented helm. Mute reminders that consequences require very little time to happen. Let's pull close to Bruce for 2 more minutes, because the bedtime lesson lives in his quiet. He understands that fear hates specificity, so he makes specifics. He checks the boggiest patches with a staff. He speaks to captains by name and by eye. He walks along the schiltrons and corrects a grip here, a spacing there, not because he thinks that small fix will win the battle, but because each fix says, I see you. We are not leaving anything to luck that we can help. Good leaders hand out calm like rations. SFX, low pipe. Men murmuring, a log settles in a fire. When the cheering dies and the horses stop blowing, the field is just wind and moths. The men who were brave today will have to be brave again tomorrow. Unless sleep. That's war's worst habitry, hiring you for the same job at dawn. So Bruce does the last smart thing a person can do before a hard day. He sleeps. Not because he's careless, but because he knows panic ruins wrists. We should say the name once more with honor, Sir Henry de Bohun. He wasn't foolish. He was faithful to the code he'd been taught. He saw something that looked like providence, and he took his shot. Men who take shots create the moments that teach other men restraint. In another universe, with heavier ground under the palfrey's hooves, the story could turn. It didn't. But hearing how close it always is helps us keep humility in our pockets. Soft cue, breathe in and out. Let the crowd's roar recede to a far shore. Tomorrow, the one history books underline will be mud and pikes and horses who suddenly don't know what their legs are for, and kings who learn what maps taste like when they're swallowed. But the night before has its own crown. One swing, perfectly timed, reminding everyone that patience is faster than speed if you hold still long enough as you drift. Keep the little truths from this field. A small horse at the right angle beats a big horse at the wrong one. Waiting is a weapon when you know what you're waiting for. The tool that breaks might still be the tool you needed, and it's okay to mourn the tool. SFX, Windsoft. A lone owl, distant water, again one more breath together. In 4, 4, and out for 6. Let the grass close over hoofprints. Let the axe's echo become just another night sound. Tomorrow's men can have tomorrow. For us, the lesson is enough. Step aside from the rush that wants you, and answer with one clean thing that matters. Sleep well. When you're ready, we'll ride south to hot light and bright steel, where a king turns a duel into a product demo, and courtesy crosses battle lines like snow in summer. Different light tonight, Mediterranean light. It's bright, but not loud, glittering on a pale blue sea that looks like someone polished it for guests. We're in the years of the Third Crusade. 1191, give or take a few camp rumors. On a coastline where roads melt into beaches and news rides faster than mules. Two names hang over everything like banners that never come down. Richard, the First of England, the lion-hearted, Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, whom the West shortens to Saladin. They are not opposites so much as equals in different armor. One a thunderclap, one a tide. They will not fight each other hand to hand. That would have broken the medieval internet. But reputations have their own duels. And today we get one of those. The stage is a flat stretch near fortifications and palm shadow. Somewhere behind, cooks argue with kettles. Somewhere ahead, scouts pretend sand is a kind of road. In the gap between, a small ring is forming the way rings do. People stand in a wide circle because they know a story is about to pick a center. Richard arrives, the way weather arrives noticeable. He is not subtle, and subtlety would only confuse. His brand, chainmail, hangs off him like it was planned there. The helm is the practical kind, not the parade kind. He likes gear that survives drama. He carries a sword that looks ordinary, the kind of ordinary that is expensive. Good steel, right balance, a handle worn to fit one hand a little better than the other. If you've ever owned a tool for long enough that it remembers you, you know that feeling. Across the line, a rider emerges from Saladin's side. Not Saladin, he leads like chess. Not like checkers, but a champion whose name the chroniclers promptly misplaced because they were busy polishing adjectives for Richard. He's armored. Inlaid mail and plates, shield painted in colors the sun keeps trying to bleach. He moves with the relaxed caution of someone very used to keeping his head near his shoulders. He lifts his blade once to catch the light. The universal we're doing this gesture. Between them stands everything that isn't quite war and isn't quite games. A champion's bout won't decide the crusade. It won't open a gate or move a supply train. What it will do is feed morale like hot food. It will write a retellable paragraph inside a month that otherwise reads like marching orders. A herald glances left and right to make sure everyone is ready to pretend the rules are written down. He lowers his staff. SFX, a single drumbeat. Then quiet first contact is blunt. The champion's strike lands on Richard's shield with a noise that travels bang down bone into ground. Richard does not wobble. He downstreams the impact, the way a good tree lets wind go around it. He returns something smaller, meaner, where shield straps meet wood. Shields don't feel pain, but arms do. The ring approves in a low, pleased murmur. They separate. The surf keeps breathing. A gull says something rude. Richard adjusts his stance by a thumb's worth and offers a feint that is less trick and more question. The champion answers with footwork clean, measured, the kind of steps people take when they've drilled enough to move without announcing it. Soft cue, breathe in for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and out for 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The next exchange is why this scene ends up in books. The champion commits to a heavy cut good choice against a man whose nickname is a roar. Richard meets it not with raw strength, but with timing. He slides half a pace to change angles. He uses the shield not as a wall, but as a lever. And then, he spends all that saved geometry in one stroke. Chroniclers helpful. Enthusiastic swear that the sword slices cleaned through shield. Mail maybe down toward the saddle as if armor were fondant on a cake. Physics knocks politely to remind us that wood, leather, iron rings, padding, and bone do not behave like desert. But a decisive hit that breaks a guard, crushes structure, and makes the body redecide whether it wants to stay vertical. That's real, and you can feel the air change when it happens. The champion slumps in a way fighters recognize, less hurt now than out of options. Richard holds a beat, the careful professional's beat, to make sure the ending stays ended. Silence stands. Up inside the ring, then the sound men make when they witness something they'll be repeating over meal fires for months, a low roll that swells, ripples outward, and gets exaggerated at the edges. We are watching a leader do leadership in steel, not just win, but show the wind in a way that turns into usable rumor. Richard, who has never met a stage he didn't like, decides to add a coda. Accounts differ on the propan iron bar, a helm on a post, a hanging mail sleeve, but the point survives. He swings again, not at a person, but at metal, as if offering a product demo. See, not a fluke. This sword is not magic, he implies. My timing is the difference, is not accidental. It is practice and posture and a good read on another human's breathing. SFX, brief cheer. A couple of sword taps on shields. Surf returns, let's put this in the column marked useful myths. Medieval audiences, new armor. Many had worn it, or hammered it, or dragged it out of a cart. They didn't actually believe steel cut steel like cloth. What they believed, what they wanted to believe, was that their king's courage and craft could straighten the world for a minute. The demo says exactly that. It's theatre, but it's honest theatre. The kind that tells a true thing with props. Over at Saladin's End, nobody panics. Commanders who last learn to inhale through the nose when the crowd gasps. Saladin is many things: patient, exact, very good at not overpaying for drama. He knows one bout doesn't move a siege. He also knows respect when he sees it. Days later, when Richard burns with fever, Saladin will send snow from Mount Lebanon packed in straw to cool him. That gesture reads like a footnote, but it isn't. It's a door left ajar in a hot room, enough air to remind both sides that courtesy isn't surrender. Back in the ring, Richard does not stick around for applause longer than necessary. He has a convoy to protect, a wall to argue with, and 1,000 tiny problems that behave nothing like champions. He wipes, drinks, and moves on, leaving behind a wake of delighted storytelling. If you've ever seen a great athlete do something simple, perfectly, and then jog back as if that's the job, because it is, that's the flavor here. Mid-part breath in 4, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, out for 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Night gathers in tidy layers. Fires salt the camp like stars that forgot where they belong. Men narrate and narrations grow. Someone swears the blade cut through iron like cheese. Someone else insists he saw sparks write Richard's name in the air. A practical sergeant nods and says he hit the join, not the plate, and goes back to patching straps. All are telling the same truth from different angles. Timing is a rumor that stands up under cross-examination. A word about swords, since bedtime is the perfect time for small accuracy. Good medieval blades are not razor fantasies. They are resilient springs meant to survive bad days. They win not by sorcery, but by landing on places that move armpits, thighs above the knee. Neck gaps where male flexes at moments when posture is changing and attention is elsewhere. When a chronicle says, a sword sheared, hear this. A trained hand found a seam and pushed the whole structure past its limit. It's less magic than math, and math can be taught. That's good news. For everyone who isn't a king, now the coast hushes a little. The sea smooths itself like a sheet pulled tight. On a rampart, a sentry hums a tune that sounds like home sung softly to stone. Down by the ration barrels, two boys argue about whose lord is more terrifying and agree that either way the bread needs salt. Someone with ink stains on his thumb scribbles notes by firelight and underlines the part where the sword proved the point on iron. He knows a story when he hears one trying to pay his rent. Richard's tent glows like a lantern. Inside, doctors with learned foreheads discuss pulses and powders. The king lies still and stares at the roofcloth while his body decides whether to be reasonable. Outside, a courier brings word that supplies are late, because supplies are always late in stories where swords do tricks. This is the part legends don't love to mention. Logistics elbowing past romance. Like a clerk who has your number, we end not with trumpets, but with a small swap of respect. Somewhere, Saladin's people hand off that mountain snow. Somewhere, Richard's people receive it with an odd mix of pride and relief. The war keeps its teeth. The men keep a sliver of shared humanity. Both truths can coexist without cancelling each other. That is worth more than any demonstration. And also exactly the kind of detail that lets you sleep. Different ground to night's Central Europe. Late Middle Ages. Imagine a small walled town with half-timbered houses leaning toward a market square. Like neighbors swapping recipes. A bell has just rung the hour. Carpenters and beadles have been up since dawn. doing something that would look very odd in any other. Sentry, shoveling a shallow pit into the center of a fenced ring and tamping its sides as if preparing a garden bed. They measure, they mutter, they nod. A clerk with a narrow face checks a parchment and points to a stake. The result is a circle of trampled dirt cut by a square of darker earth. The stage for one of the strangest legal customs Europe ever tried. On for fit, a marital judicial duel, husband versus wife. Not metaphor, not a domestic quarrel with witnesses. A court-sanctioned combat with rules, officials, and the quiet belief that if truth won't sit still for testimony, it might hold still. For a club, if you're thinking, surely not, take another breath. Medieval law could be flexible and theatrical. Some regions of the German lands kept provisions in convellum, not rumored that allowed spouses, in dire disputes and after formal oaths, to ask for combat under deliberate handicaps meant to level the field, a pit for the man, a weighted flail for the woman, and costumes that look like wrestling uniforms if you squint. SFX, linen snapping in a breeze, rope creaking, a small crowd shifting. Officials arrive. The Schultheiser town judge wears authority like a cap. The marshals carry staves long enough to steer a horse. A priest hovers with a face that says he has opinions, which he does. The clerk sets the rules out where everyone can see them. Even if few can read, the husband will fight inside the pit, waist deep, with a padded cap and a stout wooden club. The wife will fight outside the pit with a cloth sling or short flail weighted by a smooth stone. He cannot leave the pit. She must keep one foot planted in a small sack fixed to the ground so she can't dance circles endlessly. Touch the ground, wrong, and marshals reset you. Strike after a call to halt, and the judges frown, the kind of frown that has fines attached. Now the litigants, we'll call them Hans and Greta, because names like these travel well in stories. They aren't caricatures. They're people whose marriage has run aground on accusations. He says he squandered her dowry and struck her. He says she stole and slandered him. Witnesses contradicted, oaths tangled. Lawyers are thin on the ground in this century, and even the ones available can't unpick every knot. So here we are, standing around a square hole. They enter in tight linen, suits ridiculous and solemn at once, because the law wants to prevent hidden armor, daggers, or the unfair aid of a heavy cloak. Greta's hair is bound under a cap. Hans's cap looks like a child's bonnet designed by a safety committee. The crowd hums with curiosity and a touch of gossip. No one turns down free theatre, especially when the ticket was purchased with scandal. Soft cue breathed in for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6. The marshal lowers his staff. The duel begins. SFX, staff thump, a hush, cloth swish, and a stone whistling. Briefly Greta moves first, because range is her advantage. The weighted cloth arcs and snaps, a farmer's rhythm repurposed for law. Hans lifts his club, not just to block but to catch the slinger trick any older man in the crowd could have advised if advice were allowed. He misses the catch and takes a glancing sting across shoulder and pride. The crowd makes the small oof of communal sympathy. Hans answers the way the rules advise, not by charging he can't, but by controlling space. He shifts in the pit, hands wide on the club, and uses it like a boom to shepherd Greta's angles. The pit is both prison and fort. He can't leave, but he can force her to choose bad lines. He feints left to bait her into overcommitting, then snaps the club up to tangle her cloth. It works halfway. The cloth slides, the stone thumps. His forearm, and he grunts the grunt of a man who will be colorful tomorrow around them. The town isn't bloodthirsty so much as invested. A baker mutters, "Keep the foot in the sack." A thatcher says, "Watch the rhythm." It's 3 beats. The priest flinches whenever the weighted stone swings close to a face, which is often. The Schultheiss does not flinch. He watches for procedure, fouls, halts, and whether this very odd machine is doing what it promises giving to people who share a roof, an arena in which to finish a sentence the law can't complete on paper. Greta changes tactics. The flail isn't only for whipping, it can feint. She lets it pendulum lazily, then snaps low, aiming to force Hans to drop his guard and swat the weight. When he does, she lifts and flicks high into helm and cap. The bonk is audible. Hans blinks tears into linen. The crowd makes that involuntary ha people make when pain is comic because it obviously didn't kill anyone. SFX a muffled thwack. Crowd laughter under breath. A judge's staff tapping once. The marshal intervene. Time. Weapons untangle. Both step back, breathing hard. The judge intones something about honor and oaths, less for their benefit than for the town's, which needs to hear that this is law, not carnival. Then he drops his hand again. Hans learns. He stops swatting. He uses the club not as a bat but as a shield on a stick, presenting the shaft for the sling to wrap and deaden its force. When Greta yanks back, he jerks the club to pull her off balance toward the pit. She stumbles and catches herself on the stake, sack foot still planted, and near foul. The marshals hover like hawks. Mid-duel breath with me in 4-4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Greta resets, and now fights as much with distance as with weight. She counts under her breath, rhythm learned from stirring porridge. Perhaps sand snaps on the offbeat. Hans, overcorrecting, turns too far to follow the cloth and exposes his wrist. She kisses it with the stone. He drops the club, more from surprise than breakage, and the crowd hiccups into silence because dropped weapons carry meaning. He scrabbles and catches it before it slides to the mud. The marshal's staff is already lifting dash warning. This is the hardest part of any fight, the middle where lungs argue and plans fray. Greta's arm trembles. Hans's grip looks like a man hanging by his fingers from a barn beam. Sweat darkens. The linen. Humiliation hovers like a wasp that can't decide which head to land on. But there is a strange and clear dignity here too. Both are bound by rules they chose when they swore for combat. Both accept that their bodies, not their neighbors' opinions, will write the last line. Greta makes the choice that decides it. Instead of hunting his head tempting, dramatic, she works low, tapping knees and shins, not to injure but to herd. She corrals him into the corner of the pit, then sets a rhythm. 2 light slaps to the club to fix his attention high, then a feed past the shaft to snap the weight into the soft part of the upper arm that makes fingers open. His club falls properly this time. The marshal barks a halt. To be sure, no follow-up turns advantage into cruelty. Hans, blinking, looks to the judge, to the priest, to the crowd that suddenly has no advice. His face is frustration and relief, at once the relief of a man who realizes he has finally reached an end. He raises both hands above the pit's rim, the universal signal of yield. SFX, breath, leaving 100 bodies at once. A stave raps twice decision. The Schultheiss declares it. Greta is justified. Hans's claim fails. There will be fines, oaths of good behavior, and probably some property shifting in the quiet weeks to come. The priest, who has been auditing everyone's souls from the edge, steps forward with a blessing that sounds suspiciously like, "Please never do this again." The marshals take the weapons the way one takes toys from overtired children. Greta doesn't cheer. She sits on the ring plank with her cloth unknotted across her knees and breathes the long breath of someone whose world has stopped shaking. Hans stays in the pit for an extra moment he doesn't need, not because rules demand it, but because it is simpler to look at dirt than faces. When he climbs out, he does it without help, which is its own little dignity. Soft cue, breathe in and out. Let the square blur at the edges. We should speak gently about fairness. The pit duel advertises equality by asymmetry. A man heavy and strong is confined. A woman lighter and quicker is anchored. Each gets a weapon that suits the constraint club for reach inside a hole, weight on a string for a dance in a small radius. It's an attempt at balance by design, not always by result. Many towns never used the custom. Where it did appear, it could be lethal, and yet, seen from the century that invented it, the thing is almost rational. It admits what we still struggle to admit. True fairness is rarely two identical paths. Sometimes it is two different bridges aiming at the same shore. If you've seen the old fight books, the earnest drawings with tidy captions, you'll recognize this tableau. The linen suits, the sack, the club extended like a lever, the sling, wide enough to be both weapon and flag. Illustrations make it look like dance steps. Real breath is messier. But the woodcuts and the rules share a hope. Write it down, and maybe people will behave. Sometimes they did. Sometimes they didn't. Law is a mirror with ambitions. SFX, crowd dispersing. Broom on boards, a distant cart squeaking. The ring empties the way, markets empty swiftly, with a trail of comment. A child drags a stick in the dust, tracing the shape of the pit and turning it into a lake for a tiny imaginary boat. A cooper says, "Well fought," without specifying to whom, and that is graciousness enough for a morning. An old woman in a dark kerchief shakes her head, but there's a softness in it. She has lived long enough to know that some arguments only end when bodies get tired. Hans and Greta leave by different lanes. They will have to find a new grammar for their lives, how to speak to each other across this verdict, how to share. A town that watched them hit one another politely. The law has given them a decision and no instructions. Most laws do. What do we carry from this square hole to our quiet rooms? 3 small things you can tuck under the pillow. Rules shape outcomes. Change the floor, and you change the fight. Balance isn't sameness. Sometimes fair looks uneven up close. Endings help, even imperfect ones. Bodies know when a story is over, and rest begins right there. Different sky tonight low. Sullen clouds over the market town of Evesham. Morning of August 4th, 1265. The air smells of wet hay and iron. You can hear the river Avon somewhere off to the side, muttering to itself in loops. Men are tightening straps with hands that were pruning vines a season ago. This is the endgame of England's Second Barons' War, when arguments about power and money graduated from parchment to mud. On one side, the royal banner of King Henry III and his son, Prince Edward Long-limbed, hawk-eyed, impatient in the way brilliant cavalrymen are impatient. He will be Edward I one day, and historians will learn to use words like formidable because terrifying makes people nervous. On the other side, the banner of a different kind of courage, Simon de Montfort, the rebel earl who believed barons and townsmen should have more say in how a king spends a kingdom. Montfort's cause had won, then wobbled, then ran out of clean luck. In that rebel line stands Guy de Montfort, Simon's son, brave, proud, and carrying the kind of personal weathermen pick up from living in their father's long shadows. He's not the main character of the war. He's the sharp edge of a feeling inside it. SFX, rain lightens. A horn far off, crow calls, the morning opens like a fist. Prince Edward has done something clever, the kind of clever that arrives at speed. He's marched hard, kept his men quiet, and lined them up where the ground likes him more than it likes the rebels. The ridge above, the river hemming in the sides, escape squeezed thin. The sky hangs heavy, banners in the rebel camp drip like tired tongues. In another story, a parley would happen here. This story is hungry. Steel wakes the day. The first charge eats the slope and spits horse breath into the grey. Edward's riders hit the flanks while his infantry pushes the middle like a closing book. Chroniclers will say later that what follows is not quite a battle but a butchery, the word that shows up when strategy meets bad geography and stays for brunch. Inside that storm of bodies and noise, small moments still happen, personal ones that history only half remembers. Guy de Montfort sees Prince Edward. That alone is enough to make the pulse argue. Imagine the heat of it. Rebel son versus royal heir, in a country where symbolism breeds faster than sheep. Their fathers hate each other by policy and by habit. The field is thick with that inheritance. Guy spurs forward because youth and blood do not like to let metaphors walk by. Edward sees him and does not evade. There is a brief clearing in the storm, the way seas make rooms for whales. Men around them hold off for the breath it takes to destinies to arrive at arm's length. This is not a duel with rules. It is a clash inside a moving world, shouts, hoofbeats, a pike scraping a horse's barrel, the smell of wet leather and sour fear. But in that small space where edges meet, it may as well be a stage. They trade first guesses. Guy strikes high, testing helm and guard. Edward answers not with a big answer, but with a tidy one, the kind that keeps you alive. Shield takes the noise. Sword flicks at the opening that isn't there yet. They wheel, mud stinging both faces. Guy presses, because pressing is how you make bigger men negotiate. Edward yields inches because inches are cheaper than blood. SFX, steel on steel. Hooves slipping, a shouted order cut off. Guy leans for the second exchange, hard committed, all the correct swagger of a knight who has read the right songs. Edward meets it with footwork that never got put in the songs, because bards prefer the part where blood makes shapes. He slides out of line by the distance of a boot heel and places a short particular cut where armor articulates. It isn't cinematic. It's professional. Guy feels it. The body always knows when someone has landed truth. They close again. For a second, their chest-to-chest grapple. Knee. The old human math. Guy is strong and angry. Edward is calm and mean, a combination that steals options. It could go either way in a different universe, on different ground, in a different century with different fathers. In this one, the edges around them move. Royal men crowd. Rebel men try to help and find spears where help should be. The moment tilts the way tables tilt when too many elbows lean on one side. Soft cue, breathe. In 4-4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and out for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Guy breaks free, alive, angry, not victorious. He will survive this Dastgard by mud and history, but he will not get the story bards reserve for kings who slay princes. His father Simon will not survive, nor Henry de Montfort, Guy's brother. The field will close over the Montfort dream and leave bruises that will show up later in different rooms, on different parchment, in different tempers. Prince Edward rides on, not pausing to crown the moment, because smart commanders do not stop in the middle of a moving victory to admire mirrors. He is learning a habit he will keep. Win the space first, name it later. He will become Longshanks, Hammer of the Scots in time, the sort of monarch who makes other monarchs check their locks twice. Today, he's just a very good cavalry officer whose plan is being obeyed by the ground. We step back just a little and look at the shape of what this clash meant. A private grudge tries to become a legend in the middle of a public catastrophe. It almost works for a breath. But battles are greedy. They swallow personal stories like snacks. The poet in us wants Guy versus Edward to tilt the day. The historian in us shakes his head gently and points at the ridge, the river, the flanking, the rain. You can carry both in your pockets, the shining moment and the muddy map. They do not cancel. They explain. SFX, rain easing, crows. The low moan of wind across a ridge, afternoon. The field is a sprawl of consequences, broken spear shafts, a saddle on its side, a boot without a foot. The royalists chant victory under breath because loud triumph draws lightning. In the rebel lanes, the noise is prayer, stretcher orders, and the silence of men counting friends and running out of numbers. Somewhere near the hedgerow, Guy de Montfort sits with his back against a bush and examines his hands as if they are new. He has not lost them. He has lost today, which is not the same thing. Men who survive big defeats learn strange elasticity. They stretch around a blow and keep a shape, just not the one they imagined. Years later, the anger in him will find a different stage and do something dark. But that's another city, another church, another story. Tonight, he is just a son who did not die where his father did. Let's give Simon de Montfort a breath. He championed reforms that would outlive his body commons and council, the idea that a king's power benefits from other voices in the room. He also did the things power does when it gets cornered: hard bargains, hard hands. Men are never only marble or mud. They are always both. Evesham makes an ending. The ideas pack their bags and sneak out the back to try again later with better shoes. Mid-part breath, in for 4 and out for 6. Let the ridge recede, keep the lessons near. What does a ne'er-duel inside a battle teach at bedtime? First, that personal courage is not a spell you cast on a map. It helps, it inspires, it does not move rivers. Guy's charge would be a song in a friendlier geography. In this one, it's a bright spark in a big rain. Second, that composure beats momentum more often than songs admit. Edward's calm, particular cuts do the work songs credit to thunder. The wrist that wastes nothing wins more than the wrist that wants. Third, that stories shrink and swell to fit what people need from them. A royalist soldier tells his children he saw a prince toy with a rebel. A rebel soldier tells his grandson he saw a man stand against a tide and live. Both are trimming truth into a coat that keeps the night off. Neither is lying. SFX, men calling roll. A bell from town, rain finally stops, evening leans in. Townsfolk, those who stay it, venture out with buckets and cloths. The battlefield begins its slow unhappy transformation into a place where people will walk dogs in a few centuries and barely feel the echo under the grass. A carpenter lifts a broken spear shaft and measures it with his eye for usefulness. Waste is a luxury villagers can't afford. Prince Edward is somewhere under a tent edge with a map and 3 very tired lieutenants. He is already thinking about aftermaths, pardons, punishments, how to make a victory stick when men are built to wriggle out of knots. He will be good at that, for better and worse. Somewhere else a monk is writing, hand steady despite the wet, trying to fix on parchment a day that feels like a bird beating its wings in his chest. Guy de Montfort finds a horse that isn't his, and a road that is. He will live with this day a long time. Defeat is a country. Some men refuse to emigrate. They build houses there, tend small gardens, and teach their anger to sing. None of that is tonight. Tonight is just breath and bandage, and the small, rude miracle of still being able to stand. Soft cue, breathe in and out. Let the thunder be memory. Let the ground go quiet. Pocket-sized takeaways to carry to sleep. Different forest to night dark. Resin-scented, patient. We're somewhere in late medieval Eastern Europe, where the line between law and theatre sometimes ran through a clearing in the trees. Chronicles are shy on details, folklore is not. If you ask the older men at the bathhouse or the women who keep the village keys, they'll tell you with the confidence of memory that a man once proved his innocence by not becoming lunch. They called it the way you name a storm, the trial by bear. Picture a wooden palisade thrown up in a day, rough posts, rope lashes, gaps you could look through if you were small. Inside, the ground is tamped hard. One corner holds a gate banded in iron, and another a post sunk deep, its chain wound around it like a lazy snake. Officials arrive with winter faces, a voivode's man to represent the prince, a priest with a travel-stained stole, a clerk whose ink freezes between words. They have not come for justice in the modern sense. They have come for certainty, which is a cousin that talks louder. SFX, creak of gate, chain links shifting, a hush falling over a crowd. The crowd gathers for caps, patched coats, children perched on shoulders, a grandmother holding a sprig of juniper beneath her scarf. People make superstitions when they are asked to watch something their stomachs don't approve of. In front of the gate, the accused stands very still in a plain padded jack with leather at the elbows. Some versions call him a knight, others a brigand, others simply a man who angered someone important. However the story picks its names, he is human enough to wish the ground would open and swallow him. The rules, such as they are, wear the costume of fairness. The man gets a sword, often a short one, and not very sharp. He may not carry a spear too easy to poke from a safe distance. He may not wear heavy mail too easy to be brave when iron is doing the worrying for you. The bear gets a chain of a certain length and the confidence of being a bear. The officials say that God will choose. The crowd, who knows bears, quietly predicts that physics will. The priest lifts a hand. His blessing is as thin as the cold. The clerk unrolls a strip of parchment, as if a law written in a good hand could keep teeth from being teeth. A drum taps once, the old universal agreement that everyone has now seen. The same beginning, the gate opens. SFX, iron latch, low bear huff, straw shifting. The bear is not a metaphor. It is the color of tree bark and winter caves. Its breath fogs. It blinks at the light and then at the man. And no matter what you've heard about eyes being windows to souls, these are windows to appetite and annoyance. There is a moment Always, when the bear seems to ask a very simple question, is this necessary? The man's heart answers, no. The chain answers, we're doing this. Soft cue, breathe in for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. First lesson, learned by every woodsman and forgotten by spectators. Don't run straight back. The man angles sideways, keeping the post between bear and body. The chain scrapes as the bear moves. The sound gives away radius. Wherever the iron whispers, less danger grows more. He feints toward the short side, steps toward the long. His sword is not there to cut. It is there to draw lines he hopes the bear will read politely. The bear lunges and hits the end of its circle with a thump that visits everyone's bones. Dust pops off the ground. The chain sings. The man stabs more politeness than harm and withdraws, with a speed he did not know he owned. The crowd murmurs the way humans have always murmured at competence. Low, hopeful, suspicious of their own hope. The second pass is meaner. The bear is done negotiating. It weaves, finds slack, and the man suddenly learns why the old hunters said, the chain belongs to the bear. It reels him in not with hands, but with the math of circles. He trips, rolls into a knee, tastes dirt and metal, and sees very closely that bears are carpets of muscle wrapped around moods. He lifts his sword in both hands. He does not believe it will stop what is coming. He believes it will slow it, which is what most tools do on hard days. SFX, chain tensing, a quick scuffle and straw, a collective gasp. When people tell this tale, this is where they embroider. Some say the man prayed and the bear yawned. Some say the bear slipped on its own chain and laughed, as if bears laugh. Some say the man struck the perfect blow at the perfect time, exactly like stories prefer to be told. We'll keep it smaller because smaller is true more often. He nicks the bear's nose. Not much, enough. Anyone who has seen a dog rethink a game after a fingernail catches an eye will recognize the shift. The bear's head goes back. The man spends that single, ridiculous gift of time to move away, plant a foot, and circle to the post. The chain, dragged by impatience, wraps once. Around the wood, not tight, not brave, just useful. The crowd finds its voice and immediately loses it again. The officials do not blink. Blinking looks like choosing a side. The priest says something that sounds like mercy in church Latin. The bear, discovering geometry, has betrayed. It backs and yanks and snorts like a storm arguing with a door. The loop tightens. The man breathes in pieces and does not waste his breath on drama. He chops at the chain not because he believes he can cut it, but because noise is sometimes a tool. Mid-part breath in 4-4 and out for 6. Let the chain sound fade to a softer metal thought. This could end several ways. In one version, the man presses too close and learns exactly how long the chain is, and the law shrugs and calls the result divine. In another, the bear tires. The marshals step in with forked poles and wet hides, and everybody pretends they always intended to be kind. In the gentlest telling, which is the one we're going to choose at bedtime, a captain in the prince's livery raises his hand before the circle's honesty turns into certainty, and says the word courts rarely remember, enough. SFX, officers shout, poles scraping, men murmuring in relief. For men with courage in their throats and bad ideas, in their hands ease into the ring. They push the forked poles toward the collar, wedge leverage where leverage can live, and work the chains slack so they can slip a wet hide over the bear's face. A covered bear becomes a thinking bear for one crucial minute. The world goes dark. The nose becomes the story, and pause. They back it to the gate the way men back out of arguments they mean to win later. The gate shuts. Sound returns, slowly, like a town restarting after a storm. The man is on both knees, sword point. In the dirt, body remembering that shaking is allowed after it is over. The captain looks to the priest, to the clerk, to that old woman with the juniper who somehow ended up with the exact expression every grandmother uses when a child is too close to a stove. The clerk, obliged to translate spectacle into sentence, finds safe words, ordeal sufficient, judgment withheld. It is bureaucrat, for we saw what we needed to see without seeing what we feared. The prince's man declares the accused exiled instead of executed. It is mercy that looks like a road. The law keeps its theatre and spends less blood than it rented the seats for. SFX, gate bar dropping. A long exhale from many throats, light snow begins. You can call that cowardice if you like. You can call it prudence if you prefer. I call it the moment when humans felt the edge of their own invention and stepped back. It changes nothing about the era's appetite for omens, but it changes this morning. Before we leave the ring, let's admit what the story itself admits when it blushes. Much of this is legend. Towns embroidered to suit their morals. Princes posed as merciful in poems commissioned later. Bears were real and laws were real. Whether they kissed in exactly this clearing matters less than why the tale kept walking. People told it because it said three things communities needed to hear. First, that nature is not a prop. You can chain it, name it, draw a circle around it, and it will still be itself. Systems that forget that end with teeth in them. Second, that skill and small advantages are post. A chain, a half-step can turn a catastrophe into a bruise. Stories always chase grand slashes. Real survival is usually a handful of tidy choices in a row. Third, that mercy is not weakness. It's administration with a soul. Anyone can say fight until one of you stops moving. It takes more courage to say stop here and live with the untidiness of a man who leaves town alive. Soft cue, breathe in and out. Let the ring empty. Let the bear be a rumor again among the pines. The crowd drifts. Children practice brave noises once they are 2 lanes away. A cooper explains to no one in particular how he would have done it differently, which is how men forgive themselves for being spectators. The priest tucks his stole away and thinks about sermons on the difference between signs and sense. The captain scratches a scar and hopes he has not offended anyone important by choosing the word enough too early or too late. The man no knight today, no brigand either, just a person the law thought would look good in a circle walks along the road until the palisade is a shape behind him. Exile is another kind of chain, longer, lighter, quieter. The forest, which couldn't care less about verdicts, listens to his boots and decides not to answer. Pocket-sized lessons for the night, different stage. Tonight Istria and the Alpine marches in the 1200s, where castles sit on crags like cats, on warm window ledges, and chivalry is both a job and a performance review. Our main character is Ulrich von Liechtensteinable, tournament pro, and the rare medieval man who decided that if love is a religion, he would be its high priest and head costumer. Ulrich wrote his own legend in a book with a title that sounds like a vow said through a smile, Froandiant Service of Ladies. It reads like a travelogue, composed by a knight who never met a mirror he couldn't turn into a portal. In its pages, he swears that for love, he did things most people wouldn't do for tax forgiveness. The most famous, he dressed as Venus, the Roman goddess of love, in a golden gown with a long blonde wig, and rode from town to town challenging any knight whose laughter got ahead of his manners. Yes, a grown man, in a goddess costume, with a sword and a point to prove. Picture it. Dawn over a market town, roofs sweating off a night of dew, smoke rising from bread ovens, a fountain making its small, confident music. Into this ordinary morning rolls a procession like a prank sent by Olympus. Minstrels with ribbons on their lutes, squires bearing flowers as if they were lances, banners painted with the gentler sort of scandal. At the center, a rider in a gown the color of honey poured over brass, hair like spun wheat, eyes focused straight ahead, the way people do when they've made a big decision and are pretending it was small. SFX, lute, arpeggio, crowd murmuring. A child's gasp, then delighted laughter. Ulrich sits tall in the saddle. The wig tickles his neck. The gown cleverly cut to drape over armor-shaped thin and close shivers with each step of the horse. His gloves are embroidered with hearts, sharp enough to look like weapons. He carries a slim lance tipped not just with steel but with theatre. A small wreath hangs below the pennon-like punctuation. He rides to the tawny field. Knights and squires blink like owls in daylight. There is a specific silence medieval crowds make when they want to laugh but aren't sure if they're allowed. It rustles like dry leaves. Ulrich does not blink. He knows that the first rule of theatre is to own the pause. He raises one hand. In honor of my lady whose name you do not deserve to hear, I am Venus on the road, he says in the voice of a man who has practiced in front of a very patient tapestry. Mock love, and you answer to me. There it is, the hook. Any snort from the sidelines can now be harvested into a challenge. Any smirk can be translated into a couch-tulence program for the smirker. The field is suddenly as dangerous for pride as for bones. Soft cue, breathe in for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and out for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A knight broad, baffled, trying not to look at the wig nudges his horse forward. My lady Venus, he says, because sarcasm is older than sidewalks, shall we test the power of love? They couch lances, the trumpet sighs, hooves thud. In the blur before impact, Ulrich becomes ordinary physics in extraordinary clothes. The hits are real. The wood cracks honestly. Splinters fly like confetti nobody asked for. He rides clean, meets square, and unhorses the scoffer with a thump that makes the crowd forget to be clever. Laughter turns respect on a dime, that is. Ulrich's secret? The costume is a key. The riding is the lock. If the key were all, he would be a parade. If the lock were all, he would be a journeyman with good wrists. Together they make a statement in a century fluent in statements. Love is serious, and I will embarrass you into admitting it. SFX, roar of approval, pen unflapping, minstrels. Hit a bright chord he tours like this, so his book promises, across Styria, Carinthia, Bohemia, wherever gossips travel faster than carts. At each town he hangs a garland on the barriers and proclaims the same invitation. By night he sings to windows that do not open. By day he collects bruises, wreaths, and the particular admiration men reserve for other men who survive their own dares. Of course, not everyone is charmed. A burgher scoffs that a goddess in a gown should stay in paintings. A monk mutters that Venus is a pagan, and pagans are not proper dates for tournaments. A practical aunt whispers, "It's drafty," in that thing. But Ulrich is not selling theology. He is selling attention, the rarest medieval commodity after salt. He is also working a thesis that the code of courtly Lovell sighs, vows, and poetry can ride a horse and crack a rib like any other code. He wins, he sometimes loses. He always makes it memorable. And then there's the tale that gives even Bedtime a little wince. The finger. He claims in those earnest, slightly breathless pages that to prove devotion he cut off the tip of his little finger, set it in gold, and sent it to his lady like a holy relic of his own foolishness. She, he writes, sent word that she was touched, then closed her shutters promptly and forever. Is that true? You can almost hear the medieval book nodding vigorously. Absolutely. And also, I once rode with a ring through my lip, and also I jousted. For 30 days, without blinking. Ulrich is his own press office. He is also his own hype man. Some of it happened. Some of it happened brighter in ink than in dust. But even if the details wobble, the gesture is clear. He staged his feelings until the world had to treat them as facts. Mid-part breath, in 4/4, and out for 6. Let the lute drift. Let the bright silk settle. We should talk about the laughter. A man in a golden dress invites it by design. Ulrich knows. He uses it like a sling uses a stone. When the crowd laughs, he catches the rhythm and turns, sharp, to the loudest mouth. Will you stand for that? He asks the man's friends, as if mockery were a stain they can't afford to wear in public. In a culture where honor is a currency, he spends other people's coins against them, then earns them back with a clean hit and a bow. That bow matters. He plays at being Venus, but his bows are always Ulrich respectful, almost formal, the curtsy-adjacent dip of a man who wants you to see the line between costume and contempt. He's not mocking women. He's not mocking gods. He's mocking people who think love belongs in books more than in choices. And the gown, clever work. You can't just drape brocade over a cuirass and expect anything but slapstick. His tailors cut and quilt in ways that let weight fall where weight should. The sleeves hide plates that flex. The bodice laces around a chess piece so flat you could balance a goblet. It's engineering with flirtation stitched in. We step off the field with him once to see the offstage man. Night in a small castle. Minstrels asleep in a corridor like dropped wood. Ulrich in a room that smells of leather, oil, and roses. Because a man who dresses as Venus buys perfume like armor polish. The wig hangs from a peg, looking like a tired fox. He holds his gloves, flexes the sore place under his ribs, and stares at the finger he still has, perhaps wondering if the lie he printed about it will become truer the more he reads it out loud on winter nights. He is not foolish. He is determined. There's a difference. Fools chase applause because it is loud. Determined men chase meaning because it is stubborn. Ulrich wants the world to behave as if love matters as much as inheritance, parchment, and grain tallies. So he rides into cities like a sermon disguised as a circus and dares everyone to either laugh or kneel. Many do both. SFX, courtyard quiet, a single owl. Banners ticking on poles, what do other knights think? The smart ones recognize marketing. The 13th century is full of men with swords. Fewer have a brand. Ulrich's brand is beautiful nonsense. That turns serious when it hits you in the chest. It gets him invitations. It gets him enemies. It gets him remembered. When he arrives, lists fill. When he departs, scribes sharpen quills. You could call that vanity. He would call it a plan. Does the lady, this perfect, uncooperative North Star of his, exist? Probably, maybe. She might be a composite of several women, or a chorus of refusals turned into one immaculate no for story's sake. The truth isn't the point. The push is. Ulrich needs a horizon to ride toward. He names it her. Then he rides, because a named horizon is easier to find on bad roads. Soft cue, breathe in and out. Let the day's noise fold. Keep the gold thread in view. We turn back to the field for one last bout. A knight with a bored face and a fancy helm decorated with antlers, never practical. Always dramatic, decides that Venus needs a lesson. He rides at Ulrich too fast, too sure. Ulrich lets the angle do the insult. He meets not head-on, but slightly across the grain. Lance's touch, wood snaps, and the bored knight turns into an object. Lesson in centripetal force. He hits the ground with a noise that cancels the lute for a heartbeat. Ulrich reins in, salutes with the barest hint of theatre, and asks if anyone else would like to confess their disbelief in love. No takers, not. Today the field empties. Children run to find dropped pennons, and declare themselves dukes of blankets at home. A woman selling pears shakes her head in that affectionate way markets have when they've enjoyed a morning they cannot justify. A squire rolls the golden gown carefully into a chest, which is both a garment box and a reliquary. Ulrich counts bruises, coins, and compliments the trinity by which travelling legends ordered their days. Different rumour tonight, tournament field, somewhere in late medieval Poland, or near enough that the wind smells of rye and wood smoke, and the gossip travels in 2 languages. It's the kind of day that wants to be a fair, bright, breezy, and full of carts that squeak as if they're telling jokes. Heralds fuss with lists. Squires carry helmets like sensible bowls. A priest has arrived to bless things that don't. Always listen. And floating above it all, a whisper with legs. Have you heard? There is a knight who will fight without armor. No, truly without anything. You can feel the crowd lean toward the word the way sunflowers lean toward light. People come to tournaments for pageantry and risk. They stay for stories they can take home and feed to winter. Nothing feeds a story like a dare that makes adults blink. SFX, crowd murmur thickens. A drum thumps once, pennants snap. Before we go any farther, a promise, we will be tender. This is a legend told with cheeks pink from both embarrassment and admiration. The point isn't skin, it's audacity, and what audacity does to the air in a room. A rider enters the list where riders enter. He leads his horse slowly, because speed wastes attention, and attention is the only coin that buys myth. He's wrapped in a plain cloak, no jewels, no embroidery, the fashion equivalent of don't worry about it. He walks to the center. The marshal raises a staff to call hush. Somewhere, a child hiccups from trying not to laugh. The cloak drops. SFX, a collective, involuntary, oh. Then the kind of silence that makes flags louder. He stands there, not posing, not preening, just present. The body is practical, scarred, in the modest, ordinary way that says I have done my chores. The face is calm in the way that says, I knew you would react like this. There is a dark line of hair where a collar would be, and a sun mark where a glove might have ended. And that is as far as we need to notice. The crowd's first reaction is the same one crowds have at weddings when a toddler yells something scandalous, laughter pulling against manners. Then the second reaction arrives, heavier and more useful. Attention sharpened into a point. Whatever else happens will be remembered, because the beginning bit, the memory, the challenger's opponent rides out in the normal uniform of courage mail. Plates, the sensible weight of men who intend to keep most of their original pieces. He is a good fighter with a good horse and the very human problem of not knowing where to look. He aims at the face and keeps his expression professional, but eyes are liars when they're startled. His gaze flickers. That is the naked knight's first weapon surprise, cracking focus. Soft cue, breathe in for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and out for 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The marshal wavers. There are rules about weights, about edges, about saints, days and banners. There is nothing in his booklet about clothing minimums. He clears his throat. The priest clears his more loudly. The audience performs a complicated social dance of not seeing things they absolutely can see. Finally, the marshal says, the only thing that keeps a day moving. Proceed. The bout is on foot. The lists aren't set. For joust. Each man has a sword proper for the occasion, blunt for show or keen for lore, depending on which version of the story you borrowed at the inn. The armored knight squares, breathes into his mail, and lets muscle memory pull him toward. Comfort, test cuts, edges that announce themselves. The unclothed knight does something very boring and very clever. He moves, that's it. He moves. Armor asks for stand solid, efficient, weight stacked like barrels. Skin asks for avoidance. He becomes diagonals and small circles, an essay in angles. The sword in his hand is not a banner. It's punctuation, comma, exclamation point, always at the end of someone else's sentence. The crowd adjusts. What began as comedy becomes geometry. You can feel minds clicking from why. Would you? To Ahi can. The priest lowers his eyebrows 1 notch, which is a medieval absolution. The armored knight presses, because pressing is the way men in gear prove time isn't wasted. He offers cuts meant to touch plate, to test mail, to thud against padded. Jack, the problem is, none of those things are where he expects them to be. The naked knight isn't where armor says a man should stand. He spends the armored man's aim on emptiness and returns interest on openings. Wrist when a guard lifts, calf when a stance narrows, hip when balance leans forward to threaten. SFX, footwork, scuffing, a blade ticking a shield rim, the crowds. Breath sinking, we pause to say a true thing. This could have gone very badly. Bravery is often a tightrope stretched over luck. The ground is uneven, the sun is not at mercy's angle, and an audience is a cruel mirror, eager to cheer, eager to flinch. But the legend says he wins, and it says it in the voice of people who want to believe that simplicity, when married to nerve, can unhouse ceremony. How? With distance, with timing, with the psychology that turns a room cold by stepping into it, confident and unhurried. The armor makes a small sound whenever it changes, shape mail, settling, plate kissing, strap hand. The naked knight learns that rhythm. He waits for the between. That fraction of breath where all fighters live and most fighters forget to. He answers there. A low cut to the back of the ninat vicious. Just persuasive asks the armored man to respect physics. A tap to the gauntlet. Nudges fingers open for a fraction and steals a little threat that won't be returned. A sudden lunge into the space between shield and breastplate announces that modesty has been replaced by math. The armored knight, professional and honest, reads the message. My plan does not fit this room. He overcommits to a shoulder blow habit. pride, the wish to make a big noise. The naked knight isn't there. He has stepped to a place where balance goes to sulk, and he adds a gentle shove with the crossguard, less a hit than an opinion. The armored knight stumbles. The crowd makes the one sound sports make, regardless of century, a groan that turns into a cheer, because nobody died and somebody did something tidy. SFX, a thud, then cheers, a trumpet laughing to notes, flags flutter. The marshal raises his staff. Halt. The armored knight breathes like a bellows. He nods, the nod men use when they have felt the edge of someone's craft and wish to leave the day with dignity intact. He yields. The field fills with the sugar buzz of rumor turning into record. In one version, the naked knight drapes himself in his practical cloak and bows like a man who planned the encore too. In another, he simply gathers the cloth and leaves, because leaving is how some people stay large. Mid-part breath in 4/4, and out for 6. Let the cheers recede. Keep the lesson close. Now the tidy truth. This is legend-flavored history. The Polish chronicles are coy. The German pamphlets are enthusiastic. The storytellers in taverns are paid by the laugh. But legends don't last unless they do work for a culture. This one works 3 ways. First, it is a parable about purity. Of contest, I have nothing to hide, only skill. That may be naive, but naive ideas can be useful in rooms full of rules. The naked knight takes away gear and demands that everyone look at timing. It is a rude but effective audit. Second, it's an essay on psychology. He wins the duel before blades cross by, making his opponent do mental arithmetic under pressure. Where to look, how to calibrate, how to carry a body when the normal visual cues are gone. You have felt a small version of this giving a presentation while your slides glitch, fielding a question that arrives with a smile but no mercy. If you keep your feet then, you fought this duel in office clothes. Third, it whispers about freedom in a world that loved uniforms, guild, order, rank, habit. A man who steps outside the wardrobe and still wins dares others to ask what else is costume and what else is choice. Do I think a man fought entirely unclothed in a formal list more than once? Probably not. Do I think a fighter stripped down to the minimum shirt hose? Then let's do make a point to lure a mistake to become a story. Often enough for the rumor to get good boots. And honestly, Bedtime likes the version with better boots. SFX, merchants, packing stalls, children, replaying the bout with sticks. A bell for vespers as the field empties. The town returns to being a town. A baker rewinds the day for a customer who paid with gossip. A woman selling apples smiles in that private way people smile when they have seen something they will think about more kindly than they expected. The priest walks slower than usual and decides his sermon will be about modesty and about courage that sometimes arrives dressed like a bad idea. The armored knight cleans his gear. He polishes the dent the way people pet a dog that misbehaved but is still dear. He will be fine. Good fighters are made of elastic. They bounce back in shapes you recognize and respect. He will also tell the story well, because nobody tells. A legend better than the man who lost it and stayed generous. And the naked knight. The legend lets him blur at the edge of the field like heat. He becomes rumor again, which is safer than being a person when your trick is being witnessed. Say he did it to mock pride. Some say to honor a vow. Some say to win a bet that paid for an entire winter of foolishness. Every version ends the same way. He taught a room what unsettling does to confidence. and then he vanished so the room would keep teaching itself. Different field to night northern France in the 1170s. On a morning that smells of crushed grass and ambition, banners rattle like cards in a spoke. Villagers climb wagons for a better view. A priest blesses the lists with the cautious optimism of a man who has blessed enough lists to know how days can go sideways. This isn't the neat single-lane joust you've seen in tapestries. This is the Mali, a rolling, roaming storm, where dozens, sometimes hundreds of knights crash together in teams and then splinter into little 1v1s that bloom and vanish like sparks. In that weather moves William Marshall, not a prince, not a grandiette. He's a working knight with shoulders built by practice and luck that looks like skill if you don't watch his hands. Later, poets will give him titles that sound like trumpets. Flower of chivalry, best knight of his age. Today he is a man who has chosen the tournament the way sailors choose the sea, because somewhere in the chaos his talents line up neatly. He checks his girth, his lances, his spare mount. He greets friends by nickname and judges strangers by the fit of their harness. He is not thinking about legend. He is thinking about distance, angle, horsewind, and which cluster of pennons has money behind it. In the 12th century tournament economy, you don't win medals, you win people. Capture a knight, treat him well, ransom him back, and you pay for the winter. Lose your horse, and your luck sours fast. SFX, horn call, hooves beginning to drum. A crowd hush, a marshal drops his staff. The field inhales. Two wedges of riders meet, with the sound of carpentry failing under stress, wood shattering, iron biting, men cursing politely through their teeth. And then the storm opens like a flower. Pairs peel off, trios form, chasers begin. This is William's weather. He reads the swirl like some people read faces. He does not aim for the loudest duel. He hunts the edge, where a good rider has drifted a little too far from his friends, or a rich banner has gotten temporarily poor in escort. He is not cruel, he is efficient. He arrives at speed, spends his lance cleanly, not on the helm on the breast, where a square hit jars the heart and shakes the seat, and then flows through the wreckage before the man's comrades can slam. Shut like shutters, SFX, lance crack, leather sliding, reins snap taut. One man caught breathless finds William's reins at his elbow. Yield, William says, not with a growl, but a businessman's firmness. The man yields in the proper ritual, the light tap on William's thigh with an unarmed hand. Names are exchanged with surprising politeness. A squire rides up like a clerk to tag the prize and lead him toward the safe enclosure where ransoms begin their arithmetic. William has already changed horses and is gone, not because he is heartless, but because the Mali grants small windows and punishes sentiment. Soft cube, breathe in for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and out for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is where the legend gets numbers. A friendly poet later boasts that in one whirlwind season, William took more men and horses than other 6. Unhorsing opponents by the cartload, the actual counts don't matter at bedtime. The shape of it does. He's a volume fighter in a sport that rewards volume. Hit fast, hit tidy, bank the yield, move. And yet, he keeps the courtesy that makes enemies pay gladly. He helps a man up before escorting him off. He compliments a seat even as he empties it. In a world that monetizes humiliation, he makes sure the receipt reads professional. Fee, William doesn't work alone. He has a crew, a string of squires with good eyes, a partner or 3 who know when to fold in and when to flare out. The Mali pretends to be every knight for himself. The money favors men who act like a firm. They speak in little hand signs and horse moves. They rotate fresh mounts like a relay. They quit while they're ahead, which might be the most unknightly skill of all. He wasn't always flush. As a boy hostage to royal politics, he nearly died during a siege when his father refused to surrender. Later, as a young knight with more appetite than assets, he ate the tournament circuit the way hungry men eat bread. Then came patronage. The brilliant, reckless Henry the young king, son of Henry II, picked William as tutor in chivalry and traveling thunderclap. Together they turned Europe into a map of engagements. Tourneys as social networks, lances as introductions. That partnership would end ash grey, with rumours and a quarrel in the margin. William would ride on SFX, church bell far off, a wind across canvas, cheers rising, falling, rising. Watch him for a minute inside the swirl. Here's a pair he wants. One bannerman, one friend, leaning too hard into a chase. William skims along the downwind side so the horses don't scent him first. He lets the friend panic at his own shadow, then spends a lance on the bannerman's backplate. Seem not enough to kill these tournaments. Enough to make the spine forget what it knows. The man sags, the friend wheels, and William flicks. A glance over his shoulder that means your turn to a partner who slides in to finish the administrative part, the escort, the promise, the paperwork of ransom. Dozens of these micro-duels blossom and pop. In every one, William tries to land first on timing, not power. On balance, not bruising. It's the same lesson our other 1v1s have whispered all season. Just scaled up into weather. Find the gap where the human sits inside the armor. Meet him there, mid-field breath, in 4-4, and out for 6. Let hoofbeats become a metronome. Keep the picture wide. We roll the years forward. The tourney cash turns into land. Land turns into name. He marries Welleisabel de Clare, heiress, whose estates could wear entire counties like cloaks. He becomes Earl of Pembroke, which is a way medieval Europe says you won the long game. He serves 5 kings: Henry II, Henry the young king, Richard I, John, and Henry III, without ending up headless, which is its own miracle. And when war comes knocking like an auditor, because it always does, William is still there, still. Tidy, May 12, 17, Lincoln. He is somewhere in his 70s, the kind of number that makes your knees whisper caution, when he takes up the role of regent for the boy King Henry III and rides at the head of a relief force to crack a French-backed rebellion. Chroniclers with honest eyes describe an old man sitting tall, helm-strapped, as if he had misplaced time and couldn't be bothered to look for it. The battle opens in a town's tight lanes. William knows exactly how to make a Mali behave. Indoors, he threads his column through a gate, ignores the shouting geometry of side streets, and aims at discipline, not drama. When the moment comes, he tells his men to lower lances and ride through, not to stop and swing. Not to collect souvenirs, but to split the line like a plough splits a stubborn furrow. SFX, hooves on stone, echoing shouts, a clatter of dropped shields. Have at them, in God's name. He's remembered for saying short, workable, the kind of order that fits in a rush. They hit. The rebel line collapses in pieces that no longer recognize each other. Later, the victors will call it Lincoln Fair, half joke, because the ransoms were rich and quick. William leaves the field not with a speech, but with a list of task stones. Surrenders, the administrative mercy of winning properly. It is what the Mali taught him. After the tidy hit comes the tidy deal. We end back in London, years later, at Temple Church, where his effigy lies with crossed legs, a lion by his feet, stone cloak forever in motion. Tourists will stand there centuries on and whisper about crusades and kings while the best lesson keeps its voice low in chaos. Discipline looks like luck from far away. Different room to nighter, roadside, in somewhere outside Toulouse, 13th century. Think beams, dark as old plums, rushes on the floor, the air stitched with smoke, garlic, and the comfortable breath of travelers who've stopped pretending to be impressive. The signboard outside shows a painted skillet because the owner believes truth in advertising is good theology. In the kitchen, steam writes cursive on the rafters. A woman named Jahan commands the corner like a queen who has abdicated everything except common sense. She keeps 3 pans, 1 ladle, and a hierarchy that starts with breakfast and ends with complainers. Eggs hiss. Onions do that sweet whisper they do just before they turn the color of late afternoon. A cat watches with church-like solemnity. From the flower bin into this temple wanders a small, unruly piece of history. He is Sir Guillaume de Ferguillaume of Iron by name, not always by finances. Land poor, debt rich, good at 2 things, riding toward trouble and eating after it. The journey has been wet. The mood has been damp. He's paid in advance for bacon, eggs, and a corner seat away from drafts. His sword, for once, is not required. His hunger is. Across the room slides Raoul des Arènes, a knight with a cloak that tries too hard and manners that haven't tried in years. He's got the look of a man who thinks the world owes him change for a bill he never paid. He sniff-inspects the plate as Jahan sets it down, tilts his head like a disappointed falcon, and says the sentence that lights this legend. These eggs are unworthy of nobility. Jahan doesn't blink. Luckily, she says, we aren't serving nobility. We are serving you. The room smiles into its mugs. Raoul hears the smile and decides he is a sword with legs. He pokes a yolk with a dagger, as if threatening it will improve the seasoning. Gigam hears the scrape, turns, and feels something in the chest that is not anger so much as protectiveness, veteran's affection for a decent breakfast maligned friend. Gigam says, perhaps you prefer your eggs served from the field still in the chicken. Raoul rises to the occasion like yeast that forgot its boundaries. Name your field, he says, lifting the dagger so it can catch the firelight and any loose admiration. We'll settle this. Soft cue, breathe in for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and out for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Jahan plants both hands on the table. You will not settle it in here, she says, which in kitchen dialect means you are absolutely going to settle it in here, but on my terms. She points her ladle toward the hearth. No swords, no lances. I just cleaned. If you must be ridiculous with washable tools. Gidam looks at his plate, at the pan, at Jahan's face. He takes the Castian skillet by the handle the way a carpenter takes a favorite hammer, familiar, respectful, unsurprised by its weight. Raoul grins at his dagger as if it's about to get an autograph. SFX, kitchen louder now sizzle, a spoon clinking, a chair scraped back. The crowd makes a semicircle that smells like ale and anticipation. A groom mutters, my money's on. The pan. A priest in travelling black sighs, the sigh of a man whose sermon just wrote itself. The innkeeper moves the vinegar jug out of the way because experience has taught. Him vinegar is always the first casualty of drama. The bout begins the way all kitchen fights begin, with footwork and fear of breaking crockery. Raoul lunges in, textbook style, the dagger a straight opinion headed for ribs. Gijam isn't where the textbook says he'll be. He slides a step, lifts the pan like a buckler, and lets the dagger ping off iron with a sound that makes the room laugh without permission. SFX, a bright skillet ring, a startled ho. From the crowd, Guillaume discovers something marvelous. The skillet is a shield that wants to be a mace. He turns the elbow into the swing, meets Raoul's wrist with the flat clung just enough to make fingers argue with grip. Not cruel, just persuasive. Raoul shakes his hand, offended that pain would arrive without asking first. He tries again, this time aiming low, because men underestimate legs and overestimate drama. Gigam angles the pan down, catches the blade, and shoves, using the skillet's mass like a door. Raoul stumbles into a stool that hasn't learned to dodge yet. Jahan calls, "Mind the stew, because there's a pot she loves more than any man here. And if it gets knocked, she will add both duelists to the recipe." The dance changes rhythm. Raoul is quick, which counts. He is also annoyed, which spends his speed in the wrong places. He feints high, cuts sideways, and the dagger's edge kisses Guillaume's sleeve with a hiss. The room inhales. Guillaume answers with breakfast physics. He lets the pan's weight carry through in a short upward uppercut that introduces Raoul's chin to a new tone of bell SFX. A deep gong of iron on metal chap. Mugs thump tables in delight. Mid-bout, breath in for 4 and out for 6. Let the sizzle be metronome. Let the room tilt toward laughter, not blood. Raoul circles, eyes watering just enough to look philosophical. He flicks the dagger toward Guillaume's hands marked, cruel, effective because hands are how stories end. Gigam spins the pan, catches the blade again, and this time rolls the iron over the dagger's spine, pinning it to the table with a thunk so satisfying that a squire in the back whispers, "He pinned it like a trout." For a breath, the two men are connected by cast iron and bad decisions. Raoul tugs. Guillaume does not oblige. He lifts the pan slightly just enough to slide the dagger free on, with the same motion flips an omelette that Jahan had. Abandoned mid-flip when honor arrived uninvited. The omelette arcs like a comet and lands intact back in the pan. The kitchen cheers in its heart, which sounds like spoons clapping wooden bowls. "Don't applaud," Jahan says, but her voice has a smile sewn into it. Raoul, now truly furious, reaches not for the dagger, which has learned humility but for a chair. Chairs are noble weapons, available, blunt, honest. He swings, Gigam sidesteps. The chair catches a hanging onion braid, which explodes into the air like a rustic confetti cannon. Onion skins drift. Somewhere the cat decides this is the best show it has ever been paid to watch. Gigam decides to end it before someone becomes a seasoning. He feints left with the pan, then checks Raoul's forearm with the rim tap, just enough to bend the line of the next swing. In that crease of time, he hooks a foot behind Raoul's ankle, nothing fancy, just a farmer's trip, and guides him to the floor, with the gentleness a cook uses when setting bread to rise. SFX, a controlled thud, a stool skittering, the room's breath releasing. He does not strike again. He doesn't have to. He sets the pan on the table. Cloncan steps back with his hands open, the way a man steps back from a horse that has decided to be reasonable after a spell of poetry. Raoul blinks at the ceiling beams, as if counting them will improve his position. The dagger lies on the floor, like a bad idea that has learned Latin. The room waits. Jahan crosses the space, lifts the pan, and cracks an egg into it with one hand because she isn't here for theatre. She's here for breakfast. Sir Raoul, she says, the title pronounced with more hospitality than it deserves. Offer apology to the eggs, the pan, and the lady who wields both. Raoul sits up carefully, discovers embarrassment weighs more than chainmail, and bows from the waist to the skillet because sometimes wisdom arrives through the strangest doors. Madame, he says, I have slandered an omelette. I repent. Jahan nods. Acceptable. Wash the onions. Soft cube, breathe in and out. Let the heat settle. Let pride become seasoning, not the main course. How true is this tale? As true as taverns, which is to say true in purpose, if not in ledger entries. Inns breed legends, the way vineyards breed arguments. Maybe Guillaume's name was different. Maybe the dagger was longer, the pan smaller, the egg more runny. What matters and why the story stayed warm for centuries is the shape, an insult, a tool at hand, a fight the world expected to be ugly that turned, instead, into choreography and a moral with a crisp edge. A few endings are offered by different mouths. In one, the priest shakes his head and mutters that trial by skillet is not in any canon law he recognizes. Then eats 2 helpings and revises his position on miracles. In another, the innkeeper hangs the pan over the hearth like a reliquary, and travelers toss coins into it for luck until it pays for a new roof and, indirectly, a better recipe. In the most official telling, a local bailiff arrives late, hears the crowd's version 3 times, and issues the only ruling that fits. No swords in kitchens. Pans to remain in kitchens. Duels, if unavoidable, to take place outside with vegetables as seconds. As for Willem Giffard, he finishes his breakfast, warm and he pays again. Quietly once for the meal. Once for the masand, leaves a coin on the sill for the cat, because the cat did not flinch at any point and deserves hazard pay. He rides out into a drizzle that can't decide whether to be serious. Behind him, the story adds weight the way pans do, slowly, honestly, with use pocket-sized lessons to bring to bed. Use the tool you have. Elegance is optional, leverage is not. End before excess. If a clean win appears, take the bow and stop. Guard the kitchen. Some rooms are for making. Keep your swords in the rooms for breaking. Pay for breakfast twice. Once for the food. Once for the trouble you almost caused. Different quiet to nightstone cloisters, chalk paths, the hush of a monastery after supper when voices drop to the soft register of prayers and practical gossip. We're in 11th century France, where sandals squeak on wet flagstones and a brother with a broom has opinions about mud. The story they don't tell in the tidy manuscript is this: 2 monks quarreled so thoroughly that parchment could not contain it. Call them Brother Odo and Brother Hugo, one wiry and quick like a reed in the river, the other substantial, a winter barrel full of stout. And scripture, the quarrel's cause is unclear, as quarrels often are. A strip of land, a point of doctrine, or far more dangerous a question of who sings lead at matins. The abbot tried the usual remedies, stern looks, longer psalms, an encouraging assignment to muck the stable together. It did not take. Odo and Hugo's debate ripened until someone, very unwisely, proposed a trial by combat within the rule. Mind you, with walking sticks, not swords, and under the eye of heaven. And the sacristan, SFX, wooden doors creak. The courtyard's small echo, a stray chicken negotiates with a monk. They meet in the cloister garth, staffs in hand, robes belted tight. One of them has tied his habit up, as if wading a stream. The other wears his dignity like armor. The brothers form a circle, faces a blend of scandal and relief. It has been a long winter. A little theatre is a mercy. The first taps, a tentative polite argument rendered in wood. Then Brother Hugo, who has been patient all his life until now, lunges. Odo sidesteps with a speed that suggests he has sometimes late at night rescued cheese from the pantry without getting caught. The staff whistles, catches on a sleeve, and Brother Hugo stumbles into the water trough, where he baptizes himself with a splash so comprehensive the prior raises an eyebrow and a spare towel. Odo, to his credit, does not press advantage. He offers a hand. Hugo, to his credit, takes it and uses it to execute. A respectable farmer's take down monks, gasp in Latin. A pigeon abandons the rafters for less dramatic architecture. Soft cue, breathe in for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And out for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The abbot claps once the giant. Undeniable clap of authority. Enough. He reminds the brothers that humility is a weapon sharper than any staff, and that the rule contains precisely 0 footnotes, allowing monk and monk dual choreography. Punishments are assigned with pastoral precision, extra psalms, doubled kitchen duty, and a week of shared silence, which is to say, they must work side by side and communicate entirely by eyebrows by the season's end. The monastery adopts a firm policy. Disputes will be resolved by copying psalms, not clobbering. The scriptoria grows. The bruises do not. In the margins of one careful Psalm 133, behold, how good and pleasant it is, when brothers dwell in unity. Someone has doodled to staffs crossed, like repentant. Pen nibs, SFX, quill scratching. A benediction murmured. Night creatures begin their shift. We leave the cloister and walk north, where fog lies low on fields, and all important arguments come wrapped in wool. 12th century Denmark, near Roskilde. A pasture with a view of several goats busy turning grass into opinions. 2 local nobles are in a splendidly silly rage over cheese. Let them be, Lord Cuthicnecht, loud, shaped like a barrel of butterand, Sir Sven, wearier, with the restless left foot of an excellent dancer and worse listener. The complaint, whose herd grazes a strip of astonishingly competent grass, and thus whose cellar legitimately houses a set of heavenly rounds. Medieval courts adored documents. These men adored decibels, so they stage a duel. Not quite formal, not quite a brawl. Swords with duller edges, pride with sharper ones, and a cart of cheese wheels stacked nearby like spectators who paid for front row seats. SFX, cowbells, a goat bleat. With personality, distant gulls. The wet flip of a fish in a stream they circle. Knuth charges first, heavy, declarative, as if a decision could be solved by adding more of himself to the problem. Sven steps aside, and Knuth nearly trips on his own future. Blades meet with the sound of pans negotiating shelf space. A wheel of cheese, hauled forward by an over-enthusiastic cousin for morale, rolls underfoot. Goethe slips, windmills, and sits down on the historical record with a noise. That ends arguments. The priest they brought one. They always do coughs into his sleeve in an attempt not to laugh. Sven offers a hand with the polite malice of the victorious. Kuth takes it, yanks Sven closer, and for a breath the world returns to its preferred state, to men who have forgotten everything except why they are furious. Their helpers separate them with the international